is marry the right woman. You know, like many young evangelists will talk to Luis Palau after a session or something and say, I want to be a great evangelist. What should I do? And he'll say, marry the right woman. And then they'll say, okay, but what should I really think of? And he'll say, marry the right woman. And, you know, there is a price to be paid, obviously. I mean, for all of our callings. And Karen has a missionary spirit, an evangelistic spirit, like I do. And that's what makes it work. And her missionary spirit goes back to kind of like her call to ministry. And so I wanted her to just talk about kind of her start in ministry, and it's a fundraising story as well. So Karen, why don't you just share a little bit about that?
Well, unlike John, I grew up in a Christian home, and you know, we always went to church. We were the last ones to leave the building on Sunday, and I heard all the Bible stories, but didn't make a decision for Christ until I was in middle school. And so I knew I had this relationship with God, but I didn't really know how to live that out. And it was when I went to college and I got involved with Campus Crusade that I really, you know, it's like I learned about the ministry of the Holy Spirit, and I just started growing like crazy. And I really had no idea what I wanted to do with my life. And so I kind of narrowed things down, and my top areas were music and drama, home economics, and Bible. But that was back in the early 80s, and as a single woman, I was like, okay, what can I do, you know, in service to the Lord? And I really wasn't sure. So I ended up majoring in home economics with interior design. But by the time I was a senior in college, I was like, I do not want to be an interior designer. I know that God has something more important than that for me to do. And so I really felt like, well, you know, I could go on staff with Campus Crusade, and I felt like that was where God was pulling my heart, and that seemed to fit. And so I joined staff with Campus Crusade, and I really thought that I'd be on a college campus, you know, working with students or with their music ministry singing, because I'd always sung. And when I went through the staff training, they said, we want you to work in our music office in California. And that was not really what I had in mind. And I had been praying for, I mean, literally at least a year, maybe longer. Lord, whatever it is you want me to do, just show me and I will do it. I mean, that was my prayer over and over, you know, just show me what you want me to do. And when I got this message that they wanted me to work in the music office, I was not happy, and I remember kind of ranting to the Lord about it. And in the middle of this big rant, it wasn't audible, but the most audible I've ever heard God speak, and it was just like, you asked me to show you, this is it. I was like, wow, this is not really what I want to do. But, I mean, it was literally from that moment on, okay, Lord, if this is what you're telling me, then I'm going to do it, whether I really want to do it or not. And so I did. And, you know, but that meant that as a member of Campus Crusade staff, you have to raise your own support. And I'm like, oh Lord, how is this going to happen? Because, you know, I'm having to raise money to do something that I don't really want to do, and yet I know that this is what you've called me to do. So I'm going to do it. So if you've ever thought, I don't know if I can raise this money, you can do it, because if I can do it, you can do it. And really, God is the one that does it. I mean, he definitely did it in my case. It was definitely not in my skill set, and I grew up in a family of 3 girls, and of the 3 of us, I would have been the least likely of the 3 to, go out and raise support and talk to people, and I was fairly introverted, and it was really scary and very intimidating to me, and I was very much outside of my comfort zone. But I do believe that if God has called you, to the ministry that you have, that He will provide. And He definitely provided in amazing ways. But it's usually not in the way that you expect. I really thought, when I joined Campus Crusade staff, my parents, even though they were believers and they weren't against me wanting to serve the Lord, but they really did not like the idea of me asking people for money. I mean, that's how they saw it was, you're begging people, to give you money. You've got a college degree. You should be supporting yourself. And yet, this is what I felt God was calling me to do. And so I told him, if there are people that you don't want me to talk to, I won't talk to them, But, I mean, at that time I was right out of college, and so I didn't really have any of my own friends that, had the financial resources to support me that well. And eventually they said, okay, you can talk to some of our friends at the church. And so I started, just by, calling people. And it was very challenging, and I really thought that God would do it quickly. I thought, okay, the fact that they didn't really want me to do this, God is just going to raise this money up really quick and show them this is what I'm supposed to be doing. And it was the opposite of that. Instead of it happening really fast like I thought it would, it took me a full year to be fully funded, with the amount that I needed to raise. And yet I feel like, and it is so like God to do things the opposite of what we think, because I thought it would happen fast. It took a long time. But I really feel like the fact that it took that long to raise the support was kind of proof that this was what God had called me to do. And I was serious about it, and I was committed to it. As opposed to, I think my parents thought, she'll get tired and she'll give up. And I didn't, and God was super faithful. And in the middle of that, I came across a verse that really has stuck with me through the years. And it was the thing that I feel like changed my perspective in fundraising, and that's Deuteronomy 31:8. And it says, and this was, the instruction to Joshua before he was going into the land. And it says, it is the Lord who goes before you. He will be with you. He will not fail you or forsake you. Do not fear or be dismayed. And when I read that verse, I had been calling people, and I was afraid. I was very fearful. I didn't like picking up the telephone. It was a battle every day to just pick up the phone and call people. And when I found that verse, and just the fact that it said, it is the Lord who goes before you. And just this thought that God has already been there. Like, He knows the person on the other end of the phone. He knows, their perspective. He knows their heart. He knows their capacity to give. So really, my responsibility is just to pick up the phone and talk to him. Everything else is God's responsibility. And that was like such a freeing idea to me that it was like, oh my gosh, this weight had been lifted off of my shoulders. So I could actually, I was like, I can do that. I can pick up the phone and, talk to them, and then the rest is up to him. And it kind of, thinking about that kind of makes me think of, I don't know, quite a few years back now, where Henry Blackaby wrote that study, Experiencing God.
Yeah.
And it was like, look for what God is doing and join Him in it. And that was really, you know, my perspective when I would present to people, here's what I'm doing, here's what God is doing, and I'm inviting you to join me in this. And so I kind of liked looking at it like that. So I started out, you know, just calling people that I knew from my church, and I think one of the keys that they really taught us within Campus Crusade was you always ask for a referral. Who else do you know that might be interested in this? Who else do you know that has a heart for evangelism, or what, you know, whatever it is that your ministry is? And I was amazed at how many people, you know, I mean, almost every time you meet with someone, you know, they would say, oh, you know, well, I have a friend or whatever. Or I might say, you know, think about this, and I'll call you in a few days. And then I call them back in a few days, hey, did you come up with any other people that are interested? And I would say that of the money that I raised, you know, that these people that supported me consistently over the 5 or 6 years that I was on staff, the vast majority were people that I had never met before. So they weren't those personal friends, they weren't those people that, you know, were in the church that I grew up in. And I did have some of those people, and that kind of speaks to what John said, is that people give to people. Because I think a lot of those people gave because they knew me, because they knew my parents, but I didn't necessarily sense that they were, you know, really excited about my ministry. But it was these random people that I'd never met before that actually were the ones that I felt like were the heart and soul of my ministry. So that was super encouraging. One other thing I would say is, you know, the old saying, don't judge a book by its cover, or you cannot judge, you know, what somebody can give by looking at them. You know, and there were some people that I thought, oh, you know, they're not going to be able to do anything. And then you go, what? You know, that's crazy. And personal example of this, just recently, I just joined the board of a nonprofit organization in Oregon, and the guy that is in charge of our organization was meeting with a woman, and a friend of his has said, oh, you know, she really doesn't have any money to give, so, you know, you're kind of wasting your time meeting with that woman. Well, he met with her anyway, and she gave $2,000, and he was like, hey, that was awesome. A couple weeks later, she sent another gift for $3,000. And just last week, she sent another gift for $10,000. So this was this woman that the friend had said, you know, you're wasting your time. It's like, well, you know, obviously God knew better, and you know, she gave $15,000 to our ministry. So, you know, don't judge, you know, by outward appearance, or just what, or even what someone else has told you about somebody's capacity, because if they have a heart for ministry, you know, God will speak to them and use them. There were times when I met with groups of people, Sunday schools, but mainly it was one-on-one, just meeting with people in their home. Many times it felt like a test of faith and faithfulness. It was testing my faith in God and His faithfulness to provide, and He always provided. And I think that's about all I was going to share. So.
It's good. Karen, so some principles out of Karen's experience that I think would be worth us thinking about. First of all, she spent an entire year doing nothing but fundraising. She wasn't doing ministry.
No.
She was doing nothing but trying to get one-on-one appointments with people. Picking up the phone and calling and following up. How did you present your ministry to people?
I had this notebook and, you know, it just went, it started with the big picture of here's Campus Crusade for Christ, here's what we do, you know, organizationally, here's the ministry that I'm gonna be involved in. This is music, and my actual job was to book concerts for different soloists and groups. And so, you know, little by little, we kind of got past the big picture and then down to the nitty-gritty of here's what I'm gonna be doing. In order for these people to go out and present the gospel through music, someone has to be setting up those concerts. That's what I'm gonna be doing, so.
That's not a very direct ministry, is it? Does that sound like a hard thing to raise money for?
True.
It does to me.
Yes.
It was hard.
Yeah, but faithfulness, you know, just persisting. And once you would present the ministry, would people make a commitment on the spot, or would you have to follow up with them?
Sometimes they would make a commitment on the spot, you know, like you could tell, you could read like, oh, they're resonating, yeah, that's great. Other times, you know, I would just say, hey, you know, I would love for you to pray about this, and yeah, I'll call you back at the end of the week or in a couple of days, and, you know, sometimes I'd even set an appointment to call them back, you know, I'll call you back on Friday at 2 or whatever, and yeah, so a lot of follow-up.
That's an important piece of success. Sometimes it's easy to kind of get on making the appointments and doing the presentations, and then we don't do a very good job of following up.
Yeah.
Is it always best to have a set amount that you're looking for, rather than looking for a recurring?
Well, you had an annual budget that you had to raise, but the form of how people could participate could be in
Whatever,
multiple
yeah,
ways.
whatever worked for them, so, you know, like, you got to the end of the book and that's where it, you know, and there was a page that had the full breakdown. Here's how much I need to live for a year. You know, here's how much I've already raised, here's how much I still have to raise, you know, you could give a one-time gift, you can give a monthly gift, you know, whatever worked best for them. But, I mean, I had like over 200 supporters on my support team. I mean, that's a lot of people giving
Small.
$10 a month, $20 a month. I don't think I had anybody giving more than maybe $200 a month, and if that.
Another thing that's interesting about just the situation that Karen was operating in was the church that she grew up in is a Methodist church. It was kind of, to me, you know, it sort of feels like country club Methodist, you know, like it's a church where people go. It's sort of more of like a social center of people's lives. It is not a church that has a high evangelism value, really, at all. And so that was the network out of which she was having to find people that were going to get passionate about and support her work with Campus Crusade. And so, weren't you saying that, like, when you kind of told your parents you were going on staff and you said, if you don't want me to talk to some of your friends about support, I won't, and they said, we don't want you to talk to any of our friends.
Yeah. And I was just like, I don't even know where I'm gonna start.
Really?
And
Yeah, that's great.
And they did change their tune on that. But the other thing that made it really difficult was, my best friend had just gone on staff like the year before.
Oh, wow.
And so she had just raised support from this same church that was not super evangelistic.
Yeah.
And she was going on campus where she was gonna be meeting with students one-on-one, sharing the gospel, you know, and I was in this behind-the-scenes position. And so, yeah, it was very challenging.
Yeah. No kid.
And then, What was your method of staying in touch with these people once they were on board? How frequently and in what way did you communicate to communicate back?
I wrote them a letter every month, and I was on staff for, well, you know, not counting the year that I was raising support, 5 years. So for 5 years, every single month, I wrote a letter, and this was before email or any of that, so I had to go to the printer and print it off and lick the stamps and, you know, fold it and mail it, and I did all of that, yeah, every month.
So the point there is, it wasn't like that 1 year and then done. It was 1 full year, 100% doing it. And then it was, that probably took you 2 or 3 days a month to actually do the mailing. And then you're also having to monitor, maintain, add to the support. So it was a constant part of your rhythm of life. And that's just, this is life.
And then at least once a year, you know, like I would go back to my hometown, where most of these people were in my hometown, although some of them were other places. And then, you know, I would try to meet with people. So I'd be home for a week or two, and then I'd be setting up appointments with them to meet one-on-one or to speak in a Sunday school class and say, here's what happened this year, you know, here's what your money went towards.
So Karen, one question about the, people donating the money. Were they donating to the Campus Crusade account, or they were sending it to your personal account, or what was?
Yeah, no, they would send it to Campus Crusade, but, you know, like I had a personal account number that they would include on their check, or, you know, I had a little form that I could send, or that they could send in.
Okay, so it was coming through Campus Crusade. So it is, John, this question for you. So is it difficult for people to donate on your personal name?
Not sure what your question is.
My question is, like, when people want to donate something,
Yes.
is it difficult for them to write a check on your personal name?
Write it to me personally?
Yeah.
They can do that. I would love it if there were more people would just write me checks.
I'm not talking about you,
But the practical realities are, and might be an American thing. There's two dynamics. I mean, one is just the tax deductibility of giving in this country requires that the check be made payable to a nonprofit organization, not to an individual. However, I have an recent experience with raising money for what I thought was total valid ministry, and we did have checks written to the person. YWAM, Youth with a Mission.
Yeah.
My daughter went on a Youth with a Mission discipleship training school. Of course, she went to Byron Bay, Australia. And so the funding need for that was significant. She was like about a 4 or 5.5 month deal. It was $8,000 or $9,000 or $10,000 or something.
I think it was more than that.
Okay. As you might imagine, I have a pretty good list. So
fundraising was much easier than my personal fundraising was, yeah.
Fundraising letter, okay? I wrote a pretty, we put together a pretty potent letter. If you want it, I can send you guys a copy of it.
That would be
Yeah.
great,
For
John.
reference, it'd be kind of interesting, to see what we did. But then, there's you have to write a powerful letter, and then you have to write a very simple response form. Many times the response form is what kills our effectiveness because it's not clear, like how people can actually respond. Very important. So it's like, we gotta get this out the door, and we're writing a response form, and it's like, hey, wait a minute, it's like, who did they make the check out to? Like, what's the, and they was like, yeah, I talked to them, and they said, no, just have them make it out to me, personally. was like, no, that can't be right. I start looking into this, and it's like, no, that's right. They don't process it like through the organization. It's not deductible. And some of it is like, there's kind of a definition of like, you know, like education. Like I can't write you a check. I can't pay for like you to go to Corbin. I can't write a check to Corbin and have them deduct that off your tuition. That's not, there's rules about like this, what is and isn't deductible or whatever. And for whatever reason, YWAM doesn't set it up that way. I was really kind of frustrated by that, and I started to try to think creatively, like, okay, send all the money to a church that we know, and see if they could, then if they would just write, you know, add it up and then send checks to get, because I thought this deduction is going to be like really critical for everybody. She raised more than what she needed, and people just wrote the check out to Amanda Ogle. People give to people.
It's true.
Justified by the cause. None of those people could get a charitable deduction for what they did. They just did it because they wanted to support Amanda, and you know, this is where giving motivations are very complex sometimes, you know, because they're my friend, our friends, it's our child, maybe we don't even know her that well, but because she's our child and she's asking, you know, people did it, you know. So there are occasions where it can be done that way. People don't need to be limited by this, but in general, people have been trained in this country to give to the organization. So, you know, Campus Crusade processes it, put it into an account with Karen's name, she saw the gifts, thanked everybody and went on.
I would add to that, there's accountability. You know, if it's given through an organization than to the
Yes.
individual,
Right.
more often than not, you're less likely to have financial,
Yes.
issues.
Yeah, that's true too. Yeah. So people will be more inclined to give to an organization, and I think they'll give more because there's more trust. That goes to what Mike's saying. Thank you, Karen.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Karen.
Karen. Good
Thank
job.
Yeah.
Hey, Karen, I was gonna say too, I think it's amazing though, well, just seeing that over the years, how the referrals, like, you know, people give to people, they also give to friends of people kind of a thing too,
Yes,
you know?
absolutely.
How you'd say, hey, I met with Joe, and Joe said that you'd be a great person for me to meet with, and because of the relationship with Joe, they support you, you know, that whole referral.
And
Definitely.
there were some people that I contacted where I didn't really have a referral,
Okay,
but I knew of a person and I knew of, you know, in some instances, their capability of giving.
yeah,
And those were just cold calls.
Yeah.
You know, where it's like, okay, I know this person's a believer,
Mhm.
just because of general knowledge, and I'm just gonna call them and see if they'll meet with me. And they did, yeah.
which is great though, I mean, you did the work though, you know what I mean, that's a lot of faith, I love what you said, fundraising and our faith plus God's faithfulness.
Yeah.
Yeah, I loved how you talked about that, it's so true. Just like as an evangelist, you know, we share God saves, right? We don't
Yeah.
save people, God saves, Spirit of God, so anyway, it's just a
Yeah.
beautiful partnership, but thanks for sharing.
She picked up the phone.
Yeah, that's right.
Kept picking it up.
And she didn't have that one button you could push for Roy Rogers.
Ron Rogers, or
You want
Ryan,
to call.
any of those
You'd
people.
have that little button.
Can I ask a follow-up question?
Yeah, please.
Karen, this comes out of, I mean, I've been doing it for 30 years. I didn't grow up in the church. And then I lived, my family, friendships were all on the East Coast. I ended up at Oregon State. Come to Christ my senior year, no church background, anything. It took me 3 years to be fully funded. Most of my funding initially was the small donors, 10, 25 a month. But there were people I knew from Campus Crusade that were graduating, you know, over a few years with me, so they had journeyed with me. And I guess my question to you statistically, because you know we're trying to get some of our guys funded. I understand that if you've kind of grown up in the church, you get your funding sooner. If you've come to Christ later in life and don't have that, it can take much longer on average.
I would think so,
Is
yeah.
that fairly true.
I would think so. Yeah, I mean, but I do think also the kind of the quality of the church has a factor. How many Campus Crusade people have preceded you might have a factor.
Right.
I mean, yeah, there were all these people from Dallas, Fort Worth that would come on staff with Campus Crusade that raise their support in 6 weeks. Why? Yeah, lots of wealthy Christians that have a positive feeling about Crusade and, so, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of these factors, but I would say that, I don't know, what your experience is, with those $10 and $20 people, but Karen and I, literally, I support some people that I've been supporting since I graduated, 1982.
Mm.
And I've been sending $10 or $20 a month. How many gifts is that? 250 gifts, 300. I've sent 300 gifts. And frankly, they don't take very good care of me. They never call me. It's actually kind of a crazy loyalty, that's the loyalty gene in me. Where once you get started and you could almost ignore me, I would still keep giving, so those people can last a really long time, if you enlist those $10 and $20 a month people. And treat them, if you treat them right, you can actually lift them and they'll actually grow with you. And, one of the adages is major donors or, giant oak trees start from small acorns. They grow over time. So those are really important people, these Campus Crusade friends that, and we have about 10
Yeah,
people
probably.
10, 12 people that we support. We stopped doing it monthly, we just do it in a lump sum now, once a year, but anyway. Well, let's transition to life that is truly life, a view of biblical generosity. And this is where I'm gonna preach at you a little bit. Does anybody know how many verses in the Bible talk about money?
2,000?
Yeah.
More than the second coming.
More than the second coming? Yeah, I'm sure that's true. It's over 2,000 according to experts. I haven't counted myself personally, but there's a lot. We're not going to look at all of them, okay? But 1 Timothy 6:17 through 19 is my favorite passage. It's sort of a major donor emphasized passage. Command those who are rich in this present world not to be arrogant nor to put their hope in wealth, which is so uncertain, but to put their hope in God, who richly provides us with everything for our enjoyment. Command them to do good, to be rich in good deeds, and to be generous and willing to share. In this way they will lay up treasure for themselves as a firm foundation for the coming age, so that they may take hold of the life that is truly life. That's powerful. Life that is truly life. So we have that blessing of helping people experience life that is truly life. As we learn and teach these principles from the passage, here's some principles. Don't be arrogant, be humble. To put our hope in God, not money. To do good and be rich in good deeds, and to be generous. We take hold of the life that is truly life. Luis had a guy that really modeled that. He's had many, but this guy was very instrumental. Not sure if you ever met Dwayne Logsdon, Tim.
I did.
Dwayne Logsdon was raised in the Tri-Cities of Washington, which is kind of small town, USA, okay? He met Jesus, I think, through a friend in high school. He got married, I think, when he was still in high school, maybe. He went off to Bible college back east. He had virtually no money. His dad was a plumber, and so he learned plumbing by working with his dad growing up. And when he was in college, he did plumbing on the side to kind of pay for his Bible school. And he did odd jobs. He left Bible college and began to plant some churches. God gave him a vision for solving some common plumbing problems. This was back when PVC was being invented, which is plastic plumbing, which had never been done before.
Pipe.
Yeah, plastic pipe and connectors and things like that. And he is not a trained engineer, but he invented some plumbing approaches and got them patented. It was the kind of thing that would help you plumb an entire house 3 times faster than you could have done it otherwise. Do you think that would be worth some money if you invented something that could plumb a house 3 times faster? These plumbing inventions grew so big that he ended up leaving the pastoral ministry to focus on the plumbing products. And he met Luis, and through partnering with Luis, he gave over $1 million to Luis over time. He was Luis's chairman of Luis's board. He was kind of like a second dad to Luis in some ways. Who would have ever thought that he would reach more people for Jesus through plumbing than through pastoring? But he did. And he put his hope in God and not wealth. He learned to depend on God in Bible school when he was trusting him just for the resources to get through. He recognized that God was his provider. He had 0 engineering training. All this stuff was just kind of in his own mind, download from God. So God gave him the insight. And then he did good through generous giving, and thousands of lives were changed for eternity. I knew Dwayne some. He was no longer the chairman of the Palau board when I started with the ministry, but I had a chance to meet him. And he took great joy in what he did through his partnership with Palau and others. One thing that's kind of a funny sidelight, is he wrote this book, Lord, Let Me Give You $1 Million.
That's good.
Luis despised the book.
Luis despised.
Why?
Because it should be more than.
That's a true man of vision there.
That's right.
Well, I remember Bruce Wilkinson,
Yeah.
the Prayer of Jabez, Walk Through the Bible Ministries, Dallas Seminary, great Bible teacher. I met him, I was with Luis, who was speaking at a Promise Keepers in Detroit, and they had one of the skyboxes in this Pontiac Silverdome was where all the big wigs were, and so I was kind of Luis's personal assistant, and I met Bruce Wilkinson, yeah. And he was like, hey, does Luis still have that guy that funds his ministry?
Wow.
That's why Luis
That's where you
hated
hated
the
the
book.
book.
Because it gave the world the impression that Luis had this one guy that could kind of cover all the bases for him, which was not true. And so, I think literally like there was like a dumpster, you know, like, where Louise got rid of so many of Dwayne's books. I have one, I have one of the few remaining copies of it. But anyway, but what a lovely guy that got blessed with this knowledge and then used it for God's kingdom. He understood biblical generosity. And so my first point is that giving is primarily for the giver. So I'd like for you to share the greatest gift that you have ever received or the greatest gift that you have ever given. Everyone must participate.
I'll tell you the greatest gift I ever received.
Okay?
It's not gonna be finances.
Okay, that's fine.
It came with a rebuke.
Mm.
So one of my, I would say, mid-level donors for the last 30 years tried his hand after being a banker at being a rancher. So we moved to Pendleton, it's the northeastern part of Oregon. Rented some land, got 60 head of cows, started to be a farmer. You can't do that this day and age unless you inherit or have a lot of money starting out. And he was a faithful donor. He was one of those $25 a month, then he went to 50, then 75, and he fell on hard times. And he was gonna have to sell all his cattle and get rid of, you know, this dream
Yeah.
and try and figure out what to do next in life. Well, in his case, I was visiting 4 of my donors that lived in northeastern Oregon, all crew people, and I did not ask him. I just went to love on him, pray with him, see how he was doing in light of his circumstances. It's kind of what you alluded to earlier about don't assume
Yeah.
what people can or can't do. And in his case, I left, went to this home I was staying about 30 miles away, and he calls me and he says, Mike, I said it in different words, but I'm angry at you. Doug, what did I do? I'm sorry, I've hurt you. What did I do? He said, I found out that you and Stephanie are really struggling with your support right now. You've had a lull and not enough, and how are you feeding yourself, and you didn't tell me your need. That's not for you to decide what I can do or cannot do. It is up to the Lord. It's your job to share what you're doing in the ministry. And it's my job to pray and ask the Lord what I can do. You need to drive your butt back here tomorrow because I have half a steer in the refrigerator for you to take home that we've butchered so you have food for your family.
That's cool, yeah.
It was, the value of it was probably at that time well over $500.
Yeah.
It gave us enough meat in different types of cuts for well over 6 months.
Yeah.
But it was both a lesson
Yeah.
and
And a tangible blessing. Yeah.
greatest gift,
Cool.
you know, because I made a decision, he can't do anything.
That's cool. Okay, someone else? Yes.
So I didn't grow up in the church either, and got called to ministry, didn't know what that meant. Did the fleece, you know, God, you prove it this way, prove it this way, prove it, okay, so. Worked for a ministry in, I was in corrections, I was a corrections officer of King County, and in Seattle. And I left to work, so I made $27 an hour and started working for the church at $12 an hour. Gotta love that. And then God called us to Dallas, Texas to help Bishop T. Jakes with ministry. Never met him, went to a conference. It was the clearest message I had ever gotten other than being baptized by the Holy Spirit, which was a whole nother thing that didn't think happened. So long story short, in Dallas, volunteering for the ministry like crazy, 3 kids, husband, doing a double master's while doing school ministry with Bishop and doing street ministry and prison ministry, sleeping 2 hours a night, literally. Didn't have enough to keep my lights on. Didn't have enough to keep the water on. I finished one of the masters, and I was doing CPE program, which is chaplaincy program, through one of the major hospitals in Fort Worth. And my supervisor, who was also a licensed counselor, because we were required to sit in front of him because we, dealt with so much trauma all day long. And I was telling him about the financial struggle, and he was like, well, maybe you're just not called to ministry, because God wouldn't let you suffer like this if you were called to ministry. Like, dude, did you read the Bible?
Yeah.
But anyway, doing everything, I knew to do, but we were losing our house. I mean, we had hit foreclosure, I guess we had hit it 5 times, and I had gotten a word from God, and basically, a year earlier, that we weren't gonna lose our house. Well, somebody knocked on our door, my daughter answered, and the 2 ladies asked, could they go around and look at the house? And so my daughter called me to the door, and I was like, what do you need? Why are you at the door asking me to look around my house? They were like, well, your house is up for foreclosure in 14 days. So we wanted to see if we wanted to buy it. Knew it was bad, didn't know it was that bad.
Yeah.
So we went to church, got a word from God. It was the message about the famine and the lepers. And the pastor at the end stopped and said, God just said within 24 hours, the famine in your house is over. So my daughter, and she said, just don't come out of agreement. My daughter looked at me and said, the house. So we stood on that, 24 hours came and went. My spouse said, I thought God said, and I was like, don't speak about it. It's just like the centurion. We'll find out later that it happened just when he said it was gonna happen. So service was on Wednesday, 24 hours was Thursday about 9 at the end of the service. Friday comes along, get a phone call from a person that, easy to say hated me. So, I heard you're losing your house. I was like, oh gosh. And they weren't even in the same state. I have no idea. Well, I do now know how they found out, but I hadn't really told anybody. So,